You know that feeling when you finish a conversation with someone who calls you a friend, and you feel strangely empty, like something has been taken from you, but you cannot quite identify what. You sit there afterward, sometimes for hours, with this low-level exhaustion that does not make sense given that you were supposedly just spending time with someone who cares about you. You try to recall what you talked about, and you realize you cannot remember sharing anything that mattered to you, cannot remember being asked a single question about your actual life, but somehow the entire exchange revolved around their concerns, their problems, their need for validation or advice or simply an audience. And when you gently tried to shift the conversation towards something happening in your world, the energy changed, became perfunctory, polite, but clearly impatient to return to what really mattered, which was always them. You have tried to tell yourself you are being selfish, that friendship requires giving, that maybe you are just in a sensitive mood or expecting too much. You have made excuses for why this pattern keeps repeating, why you always leave their company feeling smaller, less substantial, vaguer to yourself than when you arrived. You have wondered if something is wrong with you for noticing these things, for keeping a mental tally of who asks and who only answers, who remembers and who requires constant reminding, who shows up and who always has a reason they could not quite make it when you needed them. But here is what I want you to understand. What you are sensing is real and it has a structure, and that structure reveals something essential about the difference between genuine friendship and its most insidious counterfeit. The most subtle way of being used by those who call you a friend is not through dramatic betrayal or obvious exploitation. It is not the friend who borrows money and never repays it, or who spreads rumors behind your back, or who openly competes with you. Those forms of use, while painful, have the virtue of visibility. They can be named, confronted, ended. The subtle form operates entirely differently. It presents itself as intimacy while systematically extracting your attention, energy, validation, and care without any genuine reciprocity. It wears the costume of friendship so convincingly that you feel guilty for questioning it, selfish for wanting something in return, damaged for not feeling nourished by these interactions. This is the friend who always has a crisis that requires your full presence, but is somehow never available when you are struggling. The friend who can talk for hours about their relationships, their work challenges, their existential questions, but whose eyes glaze over the moment you begin to share your own. The friend who remembers every slight they have experienced, but forgets every important thing you have told them about your life. The friend who performs care beautifully in public or on social media, but whose private interactions with you feel transactional, instrumental, oddly hollow at the center. What makes this so difficult to recognize is that it mimics the language and gestures of real friendship. These people often say all the right things. They tell you how much you mean to them, how grateful they are for your friendship, how they do not know what they would do without you. They may even become hurt or defensive if you suggest the relationship feels imbalanced, interpreting your need for reciprocity as an accusation or a failure of your generosity. They are skilled, often unconsciously, at making you feel like the problem. You are being too demanding. You are keeping score when friendship should be unconditional. You are not understanding what they are going through right now. And because you care about them, because the language of friendship has been established between you, you doubt your own perceptions. You try harder, you give more. You tell yourself that this is what real friendship requires, this capacity to show up even when you feel unseen, to keep giving even when the flow is entirely one direction. And all the while, something in you is slowly draining away. Hannah Arendt understood something profound about human relationships that illuminates this dynamic. She recognized that genuine plurality, genuine being with others, requires a space between people where each person appears to the other as fully real, fully substantial, fully present. In genuine friendship, you create together what she called a space of appearance, where both of you can show yourselves, can act and speak and be witnessed in your particularity. This space is characterized by reciprocity, not in the sense of exact exchange like a commercial transaction, but in the sense of mutual recognition, mutual care, mutual interest in the other's reality. Both people contribute to creating and maintaining this space. Both people appear within it. Both people experience themselves as seen, known, valued for who they actually are. But instrumental relationships, relationships where one person is being used by another, destroy this space of appearance. One person becomes the audience, the resource, the mirror in which the other sees themselves reflected. One person's reality fills the entire frame while the other's fades into background, becomes functional, exists only to serve the central drama of the user's life. And the crucial point is that this can happen while both people continue to use the word friendship, can happen while the user genuinely believes they care about you, can happen without any conscious malice or deliberate exploitation. This is what Arendt meant when she wrote about thoughtlessness, not stupidity but the failure to think, the failure to examine one's own patterns of relating, the failure to truly see the other person as having a reality as substantial and complex as one's own. If this is landing with you, if you are recognizing something in these words that you have been living with but could not name, consider subscribing to this channel. I explore these territories of human relationship and consciousness every week, examining what it means to live with clarity and integrity in a world that often rewards their opposites. The mechanism of subtle exploitation operates through what we might call relational thoughtlessness. The person using you has never stopped to genuinely consider your interiority, your needs, your separate existence, beyond how you function in their emotional economy. They experience you as a feature of their world, rather than as a world unto yourself. When they think of you, they think of how you make them feel, what you provide, what role you play in their story. They may have genuine affection for you, but it is the affection one has for a favorite chair, a comfortable routine, a reliable source of something they need. They do not wonder what it is like to be you. They do not track the toll their demands take on your energy and time. They do not notice when you withdraw slightly or become less available because they are not actually paying attention to you, only to whether you are still performing your function. This thoughtlessness creates a peculiar asymmetry in the relationship. You are constantly thinking about them, considering their feelings, remembering their preferences and stories and struggles. You notice when they seem off, when something is bothering them, when they need support. You adjust your behavior to accommodate their sensitivities. You carry their concerns with you even when you are not together. Meanwhile, they move through the friendship in a kind of relational autopilot, taking what they need, assuming your availability, never questioning whether this arrangement serves you at all. And because they are not thinking about the relationship structure, they cannot see its inequality. When you try to point it out, they are genuinely confused or hurt. From their perspective, the friendship is fine. It meets their needs. Your presence in their life is exactly what they want it to be. That you might need something different, might be suffering in this dynamic, simply does not compute. The cost of remaining in these relationships is higher than it first appears. On the surface, you might think you are simply giving too much time or energy to someone who does not reciprocate, a quantitative imbalance that leaves you tired but essentially intact. But something more fundamental is occurring. When you repeatedly show up as your full self and are not seen, when you offer your reality and it is ignored or minimized, when you exist primarily as a function in someone else's narrative, you begin to lose touch with your own substance. You start to feel less real to yourself. Your thoughts and feelings and experiences begin to seem less important, less worth attending to, because the person you are treating as a friend is demonstrating through their consistent inattention that you are not particularly important or interesting. You internalize their thoughtlessness. You begin to treat yourself the way they treat you. This is why these relationships are so insidious. They do not just drain your time and energy, they erode your sense of self. They teach you that your primary value lies in what you can provide to others, that your own inner life is secondary, that real friendship means endless giving without the expectation of being truly known or cared for in return. And because this happens gradually, because it is wrapped in the language of intimacy and affection, you may not realize it is happening until you find yourself feeling hollow, exhausted, uncertain of who you even are outside of these dynamics. You become a resource for others, while losing touch with your own needs, your own reality, your own right to exist as something more than useful. I know many of you watching this have been carrying this confusion alone, maybe for years. You have felt this imbalance but told yourself you were imagining it. that you were being unfair, that real friendship requires this kind of selfless availability. You have never spoken to anyone about it, because it feels petty to complain about a friend who has not done anything obviously wrong, who might even talk about how much they value you. But I want you to understand something crucial. The moment you name this pattern, the moment you acknowledge out loud that something essential is missing from these relationships, you begin to reclaim your own reality. You stop being alone with it. So let me ask you directly. How long have you been giving to someone who never truly asks about your life? When did you first notice that these interactions always leave you feeling diminished? I want you to share in the comments, not because I need engagement, but because someone else watching this needs to see your words. They need to know they are not the only one noticing this pattern. And if you cannot find the words right now, if it feels too complicated to explain, just type this: I have felt invisible in my friendships. That is it. Just that one sentence. Because when you do, you create permission for others to acknowledge it too. Your honesty helps break the silence that keeps all of us isolated in these draining dynamics. So comment below. Tell me what this looks like in your life. I read every single one, and I promise you what you are experiencing is not paranoia or selfishness. It is a genuine form of exploitation made subtle by its disguise as care. What Arendt helps us see is that genuine friendship requires what she called thinking, the active engagement with reality as it actually is rather than as we wish it to be. To truly befriend someone, you must think about them, not just when they are useful or entertaining or validating, but as a continuous presence in your awareness, someone whose well-being and reality matter to you independent of what they provide. You must be curious about their inner life. You must remember what they tell you. You must notice when they are struggling even if they do not explicitly ask for help. You must create space for them to appear as themselves rather than as supporting characters in your story. This thinking is not a burden or an obligation, but a natural expression of genuine care. When you actually see someone, when they are real to you, attending to them feels like a gift you give yourself, not a duty you perform. But the person who uses you, even subtly, even while calling you friend, has not achieved this capacity for thinking. They remain enclosed in what Arendt called the loneliness of the self, unable to truly experience others as separate centers of reality. Everyone in their world exists in relation to them, defined by how they make them feel or what they provide. And this is why conversations with them feel so depleting. You are constantly translating your experiences into terms that relate to their concerns, constantly finding ways to make your reality relevant to their narrative. Because if you simply speak from your own center, from your own experience as substantial in itself, they lose interest. They may not even notice they have stopped listening. They are waiting for you to finish so they can return to what matters, which is always some version of themselves. The recognition of this pattern requires brutal honesty with yourself. You must look directly at the evidence of these relationships without the comforting filter of what you wish they were. You must track the actual pattern of interaction, not the declared intentions or occasional gestures that sustain the illusion. Who initiates contact and why? Who asks questions and who only answers? Who remembers details and who requires constant reminding? Who shows up in crisis and who is suddenly unavailable? Who makes space for the other's reality and who fills all available space with their own? The answers to these questions will reveal the structure of the relationship beneath its surface presentation. And if you discover that you have been functioning primarily as an audience, a therapist, a cheerleader, a source of validation or practical help while receiving little genuine interest or care in return, you face a choice that is both simple and extraordinarily difficult. The simple part is recognizing that you deserve reciprocal relationships, that your reality is as substantial and worthy of attention as anyone else's, that friendship should enhance your sense of self rather than erode it. The difficult part is acting on this recognition when you have been conditioned to believe that wanting reciprocity is selfish, that real love gives without keeping score, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention come your way. The difficult part is setting boundaries with people who will interpret your boundaries as rejection or punishment. The difficult part is risking the loss of these relationships, even knowing they are harming you, because they are familiar, and because you genuinely care about these people, even if they do not genuinely see you. The difficult part is trusting that pulling back your energy from people who drain you creates space for relationships that actually nourish you, even when you cannot yet see where those relationships will come from. What happens when you begin to set boundaries with someone who has been subtly using you is revealing. A person who genuinely cares about you, who has perhaps been thoughtless but not fundamentally self-centered, will be capable of hearing your needs and adjusting. They will feel genuine remorse when they recognize the imbalance. They will demonstrate through changed behavior that your well-being and presence in their life matter beyond what you provide. But the person who has been using you, who experiences you primarily as a resource, will react very differently. They will become hurt or angry. They will accuse you of changing, of being cold, of abandoning them when they need you most. They will remind you of what they have given you, interpreting the entire history of the friendship through the lens of debt and obligation. They will make you feel guilty for needing something they cannot or will not provide. And ultimately they will withdraw, not because the friendship has ended, but because you have stopped performing your function. You are no longer useful in the way you once were, and rather than adapt to a more mutual dynamic, they will simply shift their attention to someone else who will give them what they need without demanding to be seen in return. This withdrawal, while painful, is actually a gift. It clarifies what the relationship was actually based on. How a genuine friendship can weather conflict, can adjust to changing needs, can survive periods where one person requires more than they can give because the foundation is mutual care and interest. But an instrumental relationship cannot survive the moment you stop being useful, because there was never a real foundation. There was only function, and when you recognize this, when you see clearly that someone stayed in your life only as long as you served their needs and vanished the moment you asked for something different, you have learned something crucial about the difference between genuine and counterfeit connection. The path forward is not to become cynical or guarded, not to conclude that everyone is using everyone else and that genuine friendship is impossible. That would be another form of thoughtlessness, a failure to discriminate between patterns. The path forward is to become more discerning, more willing to trust your perceptions, more insistent on reciprocity as a basic condition of intimacy. You learn to notice early the signs of one-sided dynamics. You learn to pull back your energy when you recognize you are doing all the work of maintaining connection. You learn to distinguish between the friend who occasionally needs extra support because they are going through something difficult and the friend who is always going through something difficult and never has space to care about your reality. You learn that loneliness with integrity is better than the hollow companionship of being used. And something interesting begins to happen when you withdraw your energy from relationships that were draining you. You discover that you have more to give to the people who actually see you, who ask about your life not out of polite obligation but genuine curiosity, who remember what you tell them, who show up when you need them, who experience friendship as a mutual creation rather than a resource they extract. These relationships may be fewer than the ones you walked away from, but they are deeper, more nourishing, more real. You feel more substantial in them, more known, more capable of being yourself without performing or translating or shrinking to fit someone else's needs. And you realize that what you thought was friendship before was often just the habit of being available, the fear of being alone, the hope that if you gave enough you would eventually receive what you needed without having to ask. Asking is crucial. One of the subtle ways people use you is by training you never to ask for what you need, to always anticipate and provide without requiring reciprocity, to measure your worth by how little you demand. But genuine friendship requires the capacity to ask, to risk being a burden, to trust that your needs matter to the other person. And when you ask and are met with genuine care, when someone shows up for you the way you have been showing up for them, when your struggles are treated as important as theirs, when your reality is given the same weight and attention as their own, you experience what Arendt meant by plurality. You are not alone in your own head. You exist in the space between you and another, visible, known, valued for who you actually are. If what I am sharing here resonates with something you have been living with, something you have struggled to articulate, then I want you to know there are many of us examining these patterns, learning to see clearly, refusing to accept counterfeits of genuine connection. I create these videos for people who are ready to look honestly at their relationships, who want to understand the structures that underlie emotional dynamics, who are willing to feel the discomfort of recognizing hard truths. If that is you, consider subscribing. Not because you need another voice telling you what to do, but because this journey of learning to value your own reality, of insisting on reciprocity, of becoming capable of genuine friendship rather than its shadows, it helps to have companions who understand. People who have walked away from relationships that looked like friendship, but felt like extraction. I will be here every week with another examination of how we relate to each other and ourselves. Another invitation to see clearly and choose consciously. So if this feels right, hit that subscribe button. And if you found something valuable in this exploration, let me know in the comments what you recognized in your own experience. Your reflections help all of us see more clearly. The question that remains is not whether you will continue these draining relationships, but whether you can bear the clarity of seeing them as they are. Because once you see, you cannot easily unsee. Once you recognize the pattern of subtle use, you cannot continue to pretend it is friendship without violating something essential in yourself. You cannot keep giving your reality away to people who do not value it without losing touch with your own substance. And while the prospect of ending or radically changing these relationships may feel overwhelming, while you may worry about loneliness or regret or hurting people you still care about, despite how they have treated you, consider what you are already experiencing. You are already lonely in these relationships, lonely in the specific way that comes from being unseen. You are already hurt by the imbalance, even if you have been trying not to notice. You are already diminished by interactions that leave you feeling less real, less important, less worthy of attention. The courage required is not the courage to do something dramatic or cruel. It is the courage to simply stop participating in your own erasure, to pull back your energy incrementally, to become less available, to redirect your care toward people and pursuits that actually nourish you, to let relationships find their natural level when you are no longer doing all the work of sustaining them. Some will end because they were never really friendships, only habits of use. Some will transform into something more honest, less intimate perhaps, but also less depleting relationships you can maintain without sacrificing yourself. And some, the rare and precious ones, will deepen because they were always based on genuine mutuality. And your increased clarity will let you appreciate and invest in them more fully. What Arendt understood is that freedom is not the absence of relationship, but the capacity to choose relationship consciously, to enter into connection with others while maintaining your own reality, to give without losing yourself, to receive without dependence. This freedom requires the thinking she valued so highly, the willingness to examine your patterns, to question your assumptions, to see clearly even when what you see is uncomfortable. It requires you to recognize that you have been complicit in these dynamics, not because you are weak or foolish, but because you were trying to be a good friend according to a definition of friendship that served others at your expense. And it requires you to redefine friendship, not as endless availability or selfless giving, but as a space where two realities meet and enhance each other, where both people appear to each other as substantial, where care flows both directions, not in exact measure but in genuine recognition. You are not a resource to be extracted. You are not a function in someone else's story. You are not obligated to shrink yourself to fit relationships that require your invisibility. You are a center of reality as complex and deserving as anyone else, and genuine friendship honors this. The people who truly see you will not require you to give everything while receiving nothing. They will not need to be reminded of your existence or convinced of your value. They will think about you not just when they need something, but because you matter to them, because your well-being and your reality are woven into their own sense of what is important in the world. And when you find these people, when you create these spaces of genuine plurality, you will understand viscerally the difference between connection that nourishes and connection that depletes. You will recognize how much energy you have been giving to people who were never truly present with you. And you will wonder how you tolerated it for so long, not with self-judgment, but with compassion for the person you were, the person who had not yet learned to insist on being seen. The most subtle way of being used is the way that disguises itself as care, that speaks the language of friendship while enacting extraction, that makes you feel guilty for wanting reciprocity, that leaves you drained and hollow while everyone around you sees only a successful relationship. But you know better now. You can name the pattern. You can see the structure beneath the surface. And seeing clearly, you can begin to choose differently, to honor your own reality, to become capable of genuine friendship by refusing its counterfeits. This is not the end of connection, but its beginning. Not cynicism, but discernment. Not selfishness, but the essential self-respect that makes real intimacy possible. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be known. You deserve friendships that enhance rather than diminish your sense of being alive. And recognizing this, you can begin to create a life where your relationships actually reflect these truths, where the people who call you friend are people who genuinely think about you, who remember you, who show up for you, who experience your reality as real. This is not too much to ask. This is the minimum requirement for genuine human connection, and you are worthy of nothing less.